Okay, terrific. All right, welcome to the show. This is the Podcast Engineering Show. My name is Chris Curran. Every week, we bring you an episode alternating between guest interviews, where I go over all their production and workflow and software and hardware and all about how they produce podcast episodes. And in between weeks, I often do what I'm going to do for you right now, which is overview about 2 weeks worth of my daily blog posts, which I call the Daily Goody. So that's what this episode's going to be. It's going to be short and sweet, but definitely check out all the other episodes, all the great interviews, or I should say the great guests I've had. It's up to you to decide if my interviews were great or good or mediocre or lacking. All right, well, so today we're going to talk about the daily goodies from between April 12th to April 24th. So, and I have some announcements, but I'll make them afterwards because, I want to start delivering the goods. All right, so on April 12th, which was actually my birthday, the daily goodie was titled Diamond Color EQ 2. Now, this is a plugin, the Diamond Color EQ 2. It's made by Acoustica, and I saw it on YouTube. A few people were using it and reviewing it, and so I decided to try it. It costs €150, so I didn't want to just buy it. I wanted to just see if I liked it, and I kind of did like it. It kind of adds saturation as well as being an EQ, and it also had a very distinct flavor. So it was more than just a standard EQ, and so that was pretty good. But what I found was that for podcasting, it seemed okay, but I don't think it's necessary enough to have for me to buy it. So, I mean, you could try it too. They have a 30-day free trial. It adds a lot of clarity and fullness, and I tried it a lot, but again, $150 for a plugin, or €150 for a plugin, which I don't know if I'm going to use that much. And it was, so anyway, I decided not to buy it. All right, let's move on to the next one. Earbuds rubbing. Yeah, earbuds. Do you ever record a guest on a podcast who's using earbuds? One of the most annoying things that can happen is that the little microphone that's on the wire of the earbuds, that starts rubbing against their shirt or against their hair, or it like flaps up against their chest or something. And it makes these terrible noises, these scratching noises and rubbing noises. And it's really terrible because it's not like if there's clicking in a recording, there's modules in RX7. Well, there's a module called D-Click, and it'll really help to remove the clicks. And there's all kinds of ways you can remove nastiness from audio, but the kind of nastiness that's produced from someone's earbuds, like rubbing and flapping around, that's like impossible to remove. So the best thing to do is avoid all that. And so if you are going to ever record anyone with earbuds, or if you're going to be a guest on a show with earbuds, or anybody who's using earbuds, you can really help them a lot by training them and telling them that, hey, look, that's a microphone on the wire, and if it moves around and rubs things and flaps around, it's going to make the audio unusable. That's actually what I tell people. Like, we might do this whole interview and it'll be unusable because that mic is flapping around and rubbing and stuff. So I always instruct them to hold the wire. They don't have to hold the mic right up to their lips or anything like that. They just need to hold the wire maybe 4 to 6 inches away from their body so the thing doesn't flap around and rub against stuff. And yes, they have to hold it for the whole time, for the whole episode. Because, again, it'll ruin the episode if it starts flapping around. And so sometimes in the middle of episodes, they'll let go. Some people, they'll start out good, but then they just forget everything you told them after like 3 minutes. And so some people will, like, within 5 minutes or maybe halfway through the episode, they'll let go of the earbuds and then it'll start flapping around, and you'll have to actually stop the whole interview and say, wait, hold on a second. It sounds like you're not holding the wire anymore. And they'll be like, oh, sorry. Yeah. And so anyway, one of those practical situations that us podcasters find ourselves in a lot. In professional broadcasting, radio, TV, like those people never have to deal with that kind of nonsense because they're always dealing with professional equipment. But unfortunately, in the podcasting world, because there's not big money here, we have to deal with whatever we have to deal with, and it's very difficult. So anyway, that's why some of the best things I teach in the podcast engineering school are, not just advice like I just gave you, but like a million little tips to avoid a million little problems. Anyway, let's move on to April 14th, which was a Sunday. So I titled this post, "It's Sunday, take a walk and observe." When you really start to observe intently what you're hearing, it's really quite amazing how you can sort of become much more sensitive with your hearing, and you can hear a lot of things that other people just don't hear. You can sort of train your ears. So, one thing, my advice in this post was, hey, it's Sunday, take a walk. And as you're walking, you can observe a lot of audio. And this is a great way to sort of train your ears and to become a little more sensitive to what you're hearing. You'll appreciate a lot more sounds. And also, we can all hear loud sounds. Like when something's really loud, okay, we can all hear that. But what about the really soft things? Quite often in my house, I'll ask my wife, like, what is that noise? You hear that? And she'll be like, I don't hear anything. But it's some faint noise it's usually something normal. It's nothing, it's not like aliens landed in our living room. But anyway, it just, you can become much more sensitive. And it's also interesting, especially in nature. You can hear a lot in nature. It's very interesting. Okay, next one. Don't expect magic from audio processors. Okay, there's a lot of plugins and audio processors out in the world that can do some pretty amazing things, but they are not magic. And the moral of the story is you should record good sounding audio first, period. Like you should never record something and be like, oh, that sounds terrible, but all right, I guess we'll fix it later. No. Never do that. Always capture the audio well because, again, a lot of these plugins can do some really good things, but they're not magic. They're not going to just transform an utter piece of garbage into, like, professional voiceover quality. So, anyway, and by the way, I just want to thank everyone like Mike Thomas and others who continually comment on these posts. Did you guys know you can do this? Like when I put up the daily goodie on the website, podcastengineeringschool.com, you can actually comment on them. And it's great. Well, and you can read the other comments. So the next one is to check your input and output devices every time you start or restart your computer. All right, this is just one of those things. This is like such a fundamental for me. Like every time I start my computer or if I restart my computer, literally when it boots up, the first thing I do is go to my sound settings and make sure that the proper device is chosen and that everything is chosen that I want to be chosen, right? Now, normally it's already set, right? Normally it keeps the setting, but the thing is, you never know. So you just gotta I like to be in a good habit of whenever I start or restart my computer, I always check, the sound settings. And because here's the thing, many of us have been burned on a recording session where the wrong microphone was chosen. Like you'll be talking into your microphone, you'll think everything's awesome, and then at the end, after the interview, you'll bring up the audio and it'll be audio captured from like the computer microphone, the onboard computer microphone. which is like 3 feet away, and it sounds terrible. So you thought you were talking into your microphone the whole time, and it was recording your microphone, but it wasn't. So you just have to always be clear about that stuff. And the other thing is, in a lot of services like Zencaster and Squadcast, you have to choose your microphone or your input device. And again, that's something that's even more obvious, that you should make sure every time that is chosen correctly. And that any guests you have on the show are also choosing their input correctly. And you should make sure you hear the correct mic. So if you have a guest joining through the internet and they sound like terrible, horrendous, and you're like, oh, you don't have a real microphone? And they'll be like, no, I have a microphone. I have an ATR 2100. And then you know from your ear that I'm not hearing that mic. I'm hearing the terrible computer mic. So anyway, next one. The TV in my Las Vegas hotel room had no low end. You know, I'm in the beginning of April, I went to NAB with for the NAB conference and the podcast pavilion, and that's where we had our Ask the Expert booth with Ralph M. Rivera and his wife Carolyn, and also Addie Saucedo. It was great. And anyway, in the hotel, in my Vegas hotel room, as soon as I turn it on, I hear from the sound that there's like no low end. They rolled off the low end. So there was no low end. It was just mid-range and high frequencies, and it sounded really thin. And here's the thing. You might think, well, why would they do that? That's terrible. Well, here's the thing. Low frequencies travel through walls, and they could actually disturb people in the next room. So like if there's someone in the next hotel room and you hear their TV, mostly what you're hearing is like low mids and low frequencies. Because a lot of the mid-range and almost all of the high frequencies, they get absorbed through the wall. They get absorbed by the wall. But the low mids and the low frequencies, they can actually travel through the wall. I mean, they get attenuated a little bit, but it still travels through the wall. So the reason some of these hotels, they'll actually roll off the low end on the TVs in every room is so that your TV doesn't bother the rooms next to you, doesn't disturb the rooms next to you. It's a good solution, actually. So, I mean, you can't fault them for that. But anyway, so it just took a little bit of getting used to. Like, there's no low end. It just sounds like you're listening to a transistor radio or something, right? All right, next one. Subtleness of transitions when mixing. Subtleness of transitions when mixing. So in an episode, when you're transitioning from, loud music, let's say the intro music, you're transitioning from the loud intro music to the announcer guy, and then you transition from the announcer guy to the host of the show, and then you have the music fading out, and then you have a transition when the guest comes in. You start to hear the guest's voice. And then if you have a commercial, let's say, it'll transition to the commercial. So there's a lot of transitions that happen. And part of mixing podcasts is to make sure all those transitions happen smoothly, meaning that the levels are good. Like, like when you fade the music, it should fade down smoothly. It shouldn't just be like the music just stops abruptly and the listener's left wondering like, what just happened? So subtleness of transition. So you don't want any aspect of the production to jump out and distract the listener. Now, sometimes you want something to jump out and get the listener's attention, but that's part of the show. Like if you want to just, say, hey, or make a loud noise, and so everyone who's listening is like, whoa, what? You want to get their attention, that's fine, but it shouldn't be, you shouldn't get their attention the wrong way, like when the music comes in way too loud, and it's like, oh, it's just terrible sounding, or an abrupt transition, right? So anyway, and of course in storytelling podcast episodes, there's a lot more transitions. So you just gotta, that's part of mixing, is mixing the transitions. So, All right, the next post here was, my NAB recap, which was actually episode 126 of this podcast. So that was my recap. Okay, next one. Editing words that are slurred together. All right? You've all heard the classic and dumb. And dumb. And right? It's the word and then but people slur them together. And it's interesting. Sometimes and most times it's almost impossible to get rid of that cleanly. You can just cut it off and it'll be like, and like it'll sound weird. The and that you're left with will sound weird. So it's actually can be very tricky to edit that the and ums. And there's other times that people slur words together, or a lot of times when people start talking, like let's say the host stops talking, the host asks a question, and then the guest starts to answer the question. They start talking, and then the host will butt in again and say, yeah, and that's my question, but in terms of, and think of it in terms of X, Y, Z. And then the guest will say, oh yeah, well, what I was going to say was whatever. And so sometimes you got to cut out some of that weirdness, right? What I was going to say was, like, a lot of times in the final episode, like, that doesn't make sense. What I was going to say was, well, what? So anyway, sometimes you got to cut that off, and sometimes that kind of thing gets slurred into other words. But the name of the game is naturalness, and of course, Mike Thomas in a comment on this post makes a great point where sometimes you can find the word and somewhere else in the episode and just replace the and dumb with just a clean and. So that's a good way to do it too. The only thing is then you just got to be careful that it sounds right. Like the inflection, the emphasis, right? Because if you pick the wrong and, it just has the wrong emphasis, the wrong sort of pronunciation or something, right? The vibe is just different. It'll sound like an edit, and it'll just sound really weird. So, all right, next one. The ultimate desktop mixer from Solid State Logic, SSL. It's called the 6. And this is a mixer. This is a little desktop mixer made by SSL, which is one of the greatest audio, manufacturers in the world, audio hardware manufacturers. And I saw this mixer at NAB. It's a little mixer. Now, here's the thing about this mixer, though. It's not really necessary for podcasting because it's about $1,500 and it's just a little mini analog mixer. It's not even an audio interface. You can only plug in 2 microphones, although it does have another 1 or 2 inputs for like line level signals, like if you had an iPad or a computer coming in. So it's a small mixer, but it's very high quality. And so some people, for let's say streaming, it might work really well. But again, it's not an interface. So if you buy this, you still need an interface. And so anyway, the point is, this is really not for podcasting, but it's just such a cool little mixer. If you get a chance to see pictures of it and all, it's pretty cool. I mean, to get the quality of Solid State Logic mixer is really great. Because when I was coming up in the studios, we used a lot of SSLs, and they're just great. Okay, next one, cloud storage. Well, I back up all my production files locally on several redundant hard drives, but I also keep a backup of the past 6 to 12 months worth of files in my Dropbox. And I just read Bob Berge, actually he commented on this post saying he uses Backblaze to back up to the cloud, which is $5 a month. I've also heard of Backblaze before from Daniel J. Lewis, so I might have to look into Backblaze. Although Dropbox works well for me because a lot of times I'm sharing files, and I don't know if you can share files from Backblaze, but anyway, cloud storage is really important. I mean, for instance, after every session I do, whether it's with my show or any of my clients' shows, I immediately back everything up to the cloud because, if my computer blows up 20 minutes after a session, like I want those files to be in the cloud. So I always back everything up to the cloud. And it's usually, again, like the past 6 to 12 months worth of episodes. I don't keep everything there for, years and years and years, but all of the recent stuff I put up into the cloud. All right, next one is the RX-7 Dialogue Contour for finishing a sentence. All right, so you guys know Isotope makes RX-7, which is an amazing software, and one of the modules in it is called Dialogue Contour. And the cool thing here is that, this is what it does. Let's say you have a guest on a podcast that is answering a question, and let's say their answer is 5 minutes long. And you, as the host or the producer, you realize that 2 minutes into their answer, that was a good answer. The first 2 minutes was a good answer, but the next 3 minutes is not necessary, and you want to cut that out. The problem is, right at 2 minutes, they were continuing to talk, meaning when you finish a sentence, the pitch in your voice goes down. Just like I did there, the pitch goes down. And that is sort of like one of those unconscious ways in which we communicate, that if halfway through a sentence, if I'm not done speaking, right? Listen to what I did there. If I'm not done speaking, like you see the tone, the tone and the inflection of my voice there, like I'm going to say something else. So what happens is if you edit someone, if you want to edit at a point where the person is about to say something else and you cut it, that sounds really weird. So what you can do with this dialogue contour is you can take the end of that sentence that maybe was going up, where they were going to keep talking, and you can actually pitch down the end, like the last word, you can have it just pitched down. So instead of keep talking, it'll be like, keep talking. Like you can pitch it down so it sounds like they literally finished their thought and they're done talking. That's one of the things you can do with the dialogue contour, module of RX-7. It's pretty cool. I haven't used it, but it is very cool for sure. All right, next one, attending conferences. Man, this is like, I can't say enough good things about attending conferences. I've attended every podcast movement that there ever was, and I've attended every PodFest except for the first one. So, and I love them. Twice a year, I go to these conferences, and it's great. I don't know. Do you go to conferences? Well, if you need some little kick in the pants with your attitude or your energy level about podcasting, if you lost that loving feeling a little bit and you need to be pumped up, conferences are a great way to do it. They're also a great way to develop relationships. I mean, you just attending conferences accomplishes so much that it's hard to quantify, like, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of dollars. What am I going to get for it? Well, that's a very limited way to look at attending conferences, because there's so much that you gain that you can't put a dollar amount on. And anyway, here's the thing. If you've attended some conferences, you know what I'm talking about. And if you have not attended any conferences, well, maybe someday you can go to one and experience it. So it's great. Yes, they cost a lot of money to go and you got to take time off, and I don't know, but for me, since I'm in the industry, it's definitely worth it. And again, just for your continued learning and some energizing of your attitude and your stamina, they're great. All right, next daily goodie. Me watching YouTube videos on audio production. Yeah, I actually watch a lot of YouTube videos on audio production, and the funny thing is, most of it's about music production because there's almost no one out there making videos about podcast production. And of course, for me, in the position I'm in, I don't need to watch these beginner videos like, how to plug in an ATR 100 or how to open a file in Audacity. Like, I'm way beyond all the beginner stuff. And in the podcasting world, most of the training out there and most of the videos and everything is dealing with beginners because everybody wants more podcasters to come into the industry, which is great. So anyway, I watch a lot of YouTube videos. Of course, I watch Bandrew Scott's channel, the Podcastage YouTube channel, which is now over 100,000 views. He's probably over 110 already by now. And Bandrew was actually on my show, this show, on episode 77. So if you want to go back into the archives and hear episode 77, you can hear him. So actually, that's where we're going to leave it. Although the next... this is a great post. The next Daily Goody, which was from April 25th, is called Rolling Down One Car Window versus Two. So if you want to learn more about that, go to the Daily Goody on the website, podcastengineeringschool.com. Of course, thank you to everyone who comments on these Daily Goodies, on the posts on the website. That's awesome. Also, don't miss the Podcasters Lounge. I don't know if you heard, but every Wednesday evening, I'm streaming for 2 hours, just hanging out with podcasters, talking podcasting, and it's just great. A lot of people show up, and the chat is really active, and people love it. There's some great people who show up. So come and hang out in the Podcasters Lounge. Just it's on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook. Just search for the Podcasters Lounge on any platform, really. You'll find it. And of course, if you know anyone who would like to learn more about the technical production of podcasts, please share this show with them. I mean, if this is your first episode listening, listen to some of my interviews and you'll see we go really deep into podcast production. And so if you know anyone who might like some of this deeper knowledge, just tell them about this show. Just be like, hey man, listen to this crazy guy named Chris. He's an idiot, but some of the stuff he says is not idiotic. A portion is not idiotic. All right. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate you not only listening, but being part of this community, the Podcast Engineering School community that we have. And of course, if you need any help with anything, reach out. I'm here to help. It doesn't cost anything. I'm not selling consultation and all this, although maybe I should. But if you ever need any help, seriously, contact me. Happy to help. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week with an awesome interview from, well, you'll find out in a week. See ya.